Let's try to go a bit deeper and try to make some commercial endpoints. So assuming that I have, let's say, let me go to the drawing board. Okay. So now let's try to make a simple teacher CRUD APIs. Okay. So how we can make that? So what I will do is, let's take only 3 attributes for a teacher. Okay. Teacher ID, teacher name, okay, and teacher age.
Can you give a short?
You can take a salary also.
Recap, sir. Please, sir, the short recap, sir. Previous one.
इसमें recap हो जाएगा. You can. In this session only, that will be a recap. So will start from scratch in this. That will have a recap. So this is my table name teacher, and these are attributes of the teacher table, which is teacher ID.
We can see that.
Sir, we can see only Eclipse one, sir, not another.
Okay, now.
Okay.
So teacher ID, teacher name, okay, teacher age, and teacher sal. Okay. Now, if I have to make this table in my MySQL, Spring Boot has something called as JPA, Java Persistence API. Okay. So earlier we had JDBC, correct? You all have worked on JDBC?
Yes, sir.
So who would create this table? Who would add the create code? Developer.
Yes, sir.
Create table teacher, TID integer 5, tname varchar 10, tAge integer, sal. So who would write the create code, create table code?
Developer.
Okay. Who would write the insert query? Even if it was written in Java, you write in the Java, right? Query. So who would write the insert query?
Insert query, developer, sir.
Developer. So all this work was done by the developer. So now what headache Spring Boot has now eliminated is no need to create the table. All you have to do is create a class with these attributes. So if you want to create a table in the database, in Java you create a class for the same. So what class will we create? So what class will I make? I will make class with the table name. Yeah.
Teacher class.
With the name of the table.
Yes.
And in that, make attributes with the name of the columns. So what are the attributes?
ID, tname, TID, TH, cell, only cell. Tname, string, tname, string, int a th, and double cell.
Keep them as private. Keep them as
We make all private.
So we can access them using getter setters. Okay. Make a constructor, whatever you want. Okay. Make setter getters. Okay. So now this class is my entity class. So I will annotate it with @entity. Annotate it with what? @entity. So entity class is the class when you will run the application, automatically table will be created with the name of the entity class, and the columns will be attributes of that class. No need to create the table. The developer is freed up from that work of creating a table. Now it is not our job to create database tables in the backend. Our job is just to write a class, annotate it with entity. But now it is compulsory for this class to have a primary key. And the which column is primary key over here?
TID.
So you have to annotate that with @ID. Annotate it with what? So that column which you want to make primary key, annotate with @ID. So automatically it will take this as a primary key. Okay. If you want to change the name of the column in the table, okay, that here it is looking like T name. Here it is looking like Sal, but in the column, in the table, I want it to be as salary. So you can annotate it with @column. Annotate with what? And then give the name of the column over here in double quotes. So this also you can do. So our job is just to now create the entity class. And now once my entity class is ready, and now I run my application, you will see a table will automatically be created with each of my entity classes, and all the attributes of that class will be the columns of that class. So let's start by creating this first. So I go to my application. Where's my application? What was it?
Annotation मतलब क्या होता है सर?
Annotation
What
मतलब
is the meaning of annotation?
Annotation means we are instructing the compiler to do this on our behalf. That is called as annotation. So now we will not create the setter getters. We can write an annotation for that also. So which was our program yesterday? This one? Or this was the Spring Bean? We made a app yesterday, right? This one, which is this app?
Spring Boot.
College one. Okay. So this was our app. So now I go to my entity package, right click, new, and class. What name? So give the name of the entity class. By this name, a table will be created. Annotate it with which attribute, which annotation? Okay, and import it from persistence. Okay, javax dot persistence, import it from here. Now what all attributes you want? TID,
in T name, string T name, in double, इसका double salary, अच्छा, age, TH, sal.
okay. Now you have to annotate at least one column as your ID. So I will take this as my ID with a capital I. Okay, and how do you want the ID to be generated? How do you want that ID to be generated? For that we have generated value. Okay, so you can use that annotation. Just type GEN, control space bar. Okay, and this will have a strategy, like how you want to auto increment or what. Strategy equals to generation type. Now what type of generation you want? Auto increment you want, identity, sequence. Okay, so let's take identity. We will give the IDs. Now if you want to add, you can add the const. So this is compulsory. Rest, if you want to change the column names, you can change. It's up to you. Now add the getter setters. Add the constructors. Now, which database am I pointing to? I am pointing to this database, SCS DB new. So if I go to this database and check, are there any tables right now? Are there any tables in the database?
No.
This is my database. Okay, this is my local host, and these are my databases. So I go to SCS DB new, and there is no table. You see, there's no number besides that. It doesn't contain any table, 0 tables. Now, as soon as I run my application, what will happen? What should happen?
Table will create it.
By what name?
Teacher.
By the name of the class which is marked as @entity. And this will be my primary key of that table. And these will be columns of that table. Now let's run the application. So if it runs successfully, you will see that okay, it has started successfully. Now you can go and check. Just refresh this. And you will see one table has come. You see?
Yes, sir.
One table has come. Now it must be refreshed. One table has come, teacher, and these are the attributes of that teacher table. Okay, got it? So identity, it will take auto increment. So you don't have to provide the teacher ID. It will automatically increment. Only you have to just provide the sal, age, and the teacher name. Now let's try to insert a teacher record. Okay. So now let's try to insert a teacher record. So for that, front end people will make a form, let's say. Okay. Front end guys will make a form. So how will that form look like? You all have done HTML, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Add a teacher. How will that form look like? This is the HTML form.
Text box.
And we'll
Yes,
say
sir.
enter teacher name, enter teacher age, enter teacher salary, because ID will be auto incrementing. And then you'll have
Yes,
a
sir.
save button or insert button, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is how your front end form should look like. And here you can put placeholder, right? Enter teacher name, enter teacher age, and enter teacher salary. Correct? So now when you click on save, you will hit which endpoint? So let's say we hit the endpoint. What was that? /college Okay, it was what, Wadia College, right? What was the endpoint we had created yesterday for the controller? Wadia College, correct?
Yes, sir.
The screen, right? So slash Wadia College. So whenever he clicks on save, it will go to slash Wadia College slash add teacher, correct? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
And how many things have been passed from here? How many attributes is it passing?
3 attributes, sir.
So you can pass these 3 attributes, the various ways by which we can pass the attributes from the front end to the back end. So one is you can pass it individually by request param. By what way? Request param means pass how? Individual, like how we did yesterday. Like if you remember, yesterday when I ran the application, we passed 10 and 20 individually, didn't we? Yesterday when I ran the application, yesterday when I tried to hit this endpoint, addition new. What was this addition new accepting as arguments?
Num1 and
How
num2
would I pass this?
separately accepted.
After the question mark, right? You all know how to read the URL. So if I go and let's run this again. So what was it? Localhost port number 80. See over here. Is this visible to you all?
88.803.
How would I pass the parameters? After the question, the URL ends at question mark. The URL ends at question mark, and after that is the parameters. So how many parameters have I passed? And is the separator. And is the separator. So how many parameters have I passed?
2 parameters.
What are they?
Num1, num2. Num1, num2 is
What are the
100 or 514.
And in that num1 and num2 I'm accepting in which? By using which annotation?
Accepting my request param.
Request param. Okay, parameter. So
Okay.
one way of passing the data from the front end to back end is request param, but you have to pass them individually. So how many request param do I have to make now? If I have to read this, so one request param will be t name, correct? And next request param will be what? T age. Now this is what you have to pass on the front end. And T cell. And how you will store them in your local Java variable right over here. So T name is of type string. So I will take string, and you can keep the same variable name also if you want. So the only difference which you have to understand is, what you have to understand over here is this in the double quote is from the front end. Okay, so if you give, let's say, P1, parameter 1, and parameter 2, and parameter 3. So in the browser, what will you give after question mark?
First one is a string name,
Teacher name,
string age, or
date and
salary.
salary.
So what have you given? P1, right? So here you will give P1.
Yes, P1.
P1 equals
It's equal to P name,
Alice.
T name. Yes.
And P2, what are you giving P2 as?
Age,
Age. So 41. And what are we giving next? P3
salary.
equals to, let's say, $8,000. So you can give like this or whatever you feel. So whatever you're giving over here at double quote should be passed as a parameter. Front end should be aware of that. Next, so whatever is coming, 41. 41 is a what type?
Each type.
So you will take that in an
P2.
integer variable, Java. Okay, so whatever variable name you want to take, you can take. So you can take the same variable name which is there in the entity class or your wish. And 8,000 is a what type?
Salary, cell.
Because double, right?
Yes.
So double can take integer. So like this, you have to pass them as request param individually if you are using request param to read from the front end. Understood this much?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So now let's try to do that. So I should have an endpoint. By what name? By what name should I have an endpoint? If I want to save this, because on the save,
Add teacher.
calling
Add
the
teacher.
endpoint.
Teacher. And
It's
teacher.
calling add teacher endpoint. And that add teacher endpoint is having how many parameters?
3 parameters.
Because why not the TID?
Because it's automatically generated
Because
by
it is,
annotation.
because I'm using what identity? I'm using type as what?
ID. Yes, ID. ID generated value.
Identity, sir.
Generation. Yes, identity.
There are four
Generation
types of
types.
generation type. So if you want to automatically do, then you can say identity type, generation type identity. So I will not take this from the user. This I will auto increment. I will only take the name, age, and salary. So let's go to the controller and make an endpoint. And I'm adding, right? So what will I do? Get mapping or post mapping? Yeah, inserting.
Post, sir, post.
So I'll do a post. So I'll just type POS and control space bar, and it will give me post mapping. Okay, and what is the endpoint you are trying to say? And these endpoints are case sensitive.
Add teacher.
Endpoints
Add
are case
teacher.
sensitive. So how will we access this till the end? http:// localhost 8083 / Wadia College / add teacher, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how are we, which is the method which is doing this for me? So I will say public void. You can copy this endpoint only as a method name. No need to be fancy. Now, how many parameters is function accepting?
3 parameters.
Write them over here. So
Parameters.
@req control space bar request param. First parameter, what name you want to give? You will double quotes. So let's say
P1.
T name. No.
Yes.
Then that I will take in my local Java variable as string T name. Now, is this confusing you all? This T name and this T name?
Yes, sir. Little.
Then keep it T1 then.
Yes.
Then comma. Next, so now I'm dragging this closing bracket down. Now take the next
Yes.
parameter.
So @request param T2 int.
Okay. So I'm
age.
just aligning them
Age.
properly.
Yes.
P2 is what?
TH.
The age. Okay. So
Yes, sir.
that will be of int
And
type, right?
integer type is an integer and T age. Now next
Third
one is
is
a add. Yes, @request param P3 double cell, only cell.
only cell. Okay. What? This need not be same as the entity data members. This should not compulsory to match. They are just your variables. They are just your variables. You can just take them as V1, V2, V3, whatever. No need to match.
Yes.
Okay. So, but I'm just giving it in a readable format.
Yes, sir.
Now there are no more parameters. Close this and the function bracket closes. Okay, makes sense to you all? So now what happens in your Spring Boot is JPA. What JPA is? Object to see if I add a record, if I make an object of the teacher class, how would that object look like? When we are doing core Java, I would make an object and show you all, right? So that object is, let's say object is T1. And what are the attributes of that role? Teacher ID is 1, name is Alice, age is 43, salary 8,000, right? So what is this blue part? Blue rectangle?
It's object, no?
Object. And what is this green part now?
Field.
Group of field is called record. It's called as what?
Record.
Record. So what your Spring Boot does using JPA, it converts a object to a record. It converts an object to a record. So if you want to store any record, you should have an equivalent object of that. That is called JPA, Java Persistence API. Okay, object to table mapping. What is it? Object to. So if you want to store a record, you prepare an object of that, as simple as that. And then you just call the save method passing the object. So I will just call the save method and pass the object. It will automatically convert this object into a record for me. Understood? No need to write the SQL query.
Yes, sir.
What is our main job? Just to create the
Object.
And pass it to the save method, and save method will insert it for us. No need to write the insert query. That is called as JPA. What is that called as? JPA, object to table mapping. So I have got this data.
JP is for
Java
JP stands
Persistence API. Java Persistence API.
okay.
JPA. Okay. So now I have got these three individual variables, correct? Is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
So now I will create a teacher object now. Teacher T1 is new teacher. Okay. And now assign what values to this teacher now. This is in a different package, import it. So now T1 dot set.
Yes, sir. Set.
T name will come from which variable? T name, right? T1 dot set T age will come from T age. So these are individual parameters, correct? Now I'm making object of that. T1 dot set sal. Is this understood?
Yes, sir.
So I've taken individual parameters and made an object of that out of that. I will not set the ID will auto increment. Okay, now I am at which stage? I am at which layer now? You see my screen? This all
Service
layer.
Service layer, no?
Service layer. We are the service layer, Amir. This is service layer.
No, sorry. Controller.
So we are at which layer now?
Controller, sir.
Invisible to you all.
Yes, sir.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
So all this I have done where? At the controller, right?
Yes, sir.
The
Yes,
controller will interact with whom?
Logic services area.
Service. So now make a service class also. So go to your service package and make a class called as teacher service. New class called as what? Teacher service. Okay. Now this is which annotation? At the rate service. This will be at the rate service. Okay, so this was at the rate controller will be annotated at the rate what? Is my screen visible to you all? Am I audible to you all?
Yes, sir.
So controller will be controller class will be annotated with at the rate test controller. Entity class will be annotated at the rate
entity.
and service class will be annotated at the rate
Service.
At the rate service. Yes.
When you say these annotation means Spring Boot will have ready-made objects of that in the IOC container. So either you should have the at the rate component either you should have at the rate So if you want a ready-made object of that in this IOC container, annotate that class with which annotation? Annotate that class with which annotation? I've written it over here.
Component.
Component.
And if you are not using component, then you can use either of these. Either of these. Which are these? REST controller
Controller.
or @service
Service.
or entity
Entity.
or
Repository.
So if you annotate it with even either of these four or this one, a ready-made object of that will be there in the IOC container. Okay.
Okay.
So now I have made object of service, and service will interact with whom?
Repository.
Repository. So repository is the interface I have. So I go to the repository, right click, click on new, and make an interface. Repository is the interface because it actually has empty methods, and I will say teacher repository. And now annotate with what? Which annotation? Annotate the teacher repository with which annotation?
Repository.
So give REPO control space bar repository. Okay. And this R repository will extend. Can one interface extend on the interface? Can an interface extend another interface? Extend JPA repository. Okay. So extends JPA repository. So this JPA repository has all the built-in methods. Now this T and this ID, I am making this repository for which entity class? For each entity class, make a separate repository.
Yes, sir.
I am making this repository for which entity class?
Teacher.
So
Teacher.
replace this T with that entity class name. And then what is the type of the primary key over here? What is the type of primary key?
Integer.
So give the wrapper class over there. Give the wrapper class of that over here. Integer.
So yeah, integer.
Wrapper class, okay? Now as the teacher is in a different package, Control Shift O and import it. That's all. That's all repository has to be there. Okay. Now, if the controller wants to communicate with the service, the controller should have the service object over here. Yes or no? So if I have to call Amir, I should have Amir's number. Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, sir.
And if Amir wants to call Ataullah, Amir should have Ataullah's number. So the service should have whose object? Repository object. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
And the repository has access to the database. It has all built-in methods for the database. So the controller will communicate with whom? Controller will communicate with
service.
So if there is a method in the service by the name function1, let's say, how will the controller call this function1?
By using the object.
By using the object of the service, right? So the controller should have object of service, right? And now if there is a function called save, if there is a function called save in the repository, how will the service call the save method? So service should have the object of repository over here, correct?
Yes, sir.
My concern is I am telling you all the controller will interact with the service, right? So controller will call the service methods. So how will the controller call the service methods?
By using an object method. Object
of service, right? So where will the object of service be?
Object of the service.
Should be in the controller.
Okay.
And the service will communicate with the whom? Repository. So
yes, sir.
if there is a method called save in the repository, how will the service call the save method? Through object of the repository, correct?
Repository object.
So now which object should be in controller?
Save object.
Which object should be in controller now?
Service object.
So now as we are using Spring Boot, directly this will say auto wire it. That it will say that teacher service. So what is the teacher service class name? This is the teacher service class. Okay. So controller will tell teacher service, and we will make an object teacher service, and I will just say auto wire it. I want that object from the IOC container. I will not create the object. I want it ready-made. As it is a different package, import it. Control Shift O. And if I go to service, service will need help of what? Service will communicate with repository, correct?
Repository.
So it will say I want object of repository. So it will go to tell over here. Teacher repository. Sorry. And from where will it get the object? From the IOC container. How does the IOC container have that object? Because repository is annotated with at repository. So directly you can just auto wire that object. Control Shift O. That is in a different package. Okay. So now the controller will create the object, and now using this service object, we will pass that object to the service. Okay, so controller will pass it to the service. So it will say teacher service dot add teacher, let's say, and it will pass the T1. Now is this add teacher function there in the teacher service class? Is it there? Is there any method by the name add teacher in the teacher service?
No.
So you have to create it, right? So it will take the mouse over there and say create it, create the method. Now it is created. And now take the teacher repository, and in the repository there are many built-in methods. So to save a object, the method is save. So call the save method and pass this T1 as an argument. It will automatically go and save the record in the database. Once it is saved, controller can then return to the user record inserted successfully. So you can say return record inserted successfully. So the type has to change. We are seeing void over here, and we're returning a string. So this is returning what type of value? String type of value. Okay, so now let me show you all explain again the life cycle. So the front end will call the add teacher. Okay, now I want you all to approve with me. Okay, I want you all to talk. Guys, the recording is coming to an end. So what we have done, I'll just run you all through the application now. I made an endpoint called add teacher. And whenever the person hit the endpoint add teacher, he will pass me 3 parameters: a string, an integer, and a double. I will take these 3 parameters and prepare a teacher object. Okay. And now once my object is prepared, I will pass that object to a method of the service class, because controller job is done now. So controller's task is to accept the parameters and prepare an object from that parameter. And once the object is populated, pass that object to the service class. So I auto wired the object of the service class over here. And now from that, using that object, I call a method of the service class, add teacher. And I pass this T1 object over there. So I go to the service class. So if you want to go from here to the service class, hit the control key. hit the control. See now, if I take my mouse to the add teacher, the mouse cursor is like a beam. Hit the control key, and the mouse cursor will turn into a hyperlink. Okay, and now click. Press the control key and click. So now we have come to the add teacher method of the service class. Now over here, what are we doing? Passing this to the repository, and the repository has many methods for the SQL. For the insert query, it has save method, and this is JPA, object to record mapping. So I will pass an object, it will create a record in the database. Understood this much? So now if I try to run this application and hit this endpoint, let's see what happens. And once everything is successful, the controller will return record inserted successfully, because I'm saying this function will return a string type of value. So now let me run this application, run. And let me now try to prepare the endpoint meanwhile. Okay, now as this is a post mapping, the post mapping, the plain browser cannot hit the post mapping. Just the plain browser, you cannot invoke the post mapping. So for that, we'll have to use the API testing tool. Okay, so there are many API testing tools available in the market. One of them is Postman. Okay, very famously used. So you can use the Postman to test your API. I also use API dog. Okay, so I use Postman also. So you can use this Postman extension for Chrome. Okay, so you can download Postman directly. Download Postman. This is the API testing tool. Windows 64-bit, yes. It's downloading. Okay, so the record download seems to have completed. It is done. Let's install this. So the get mapping works on the plain browser, but the other mapping, update, delete, post, put, and delete, will not work on a plain browser. So for that, either you should have a front end made in Angular, React, or any of the JS frameworks. So to test the APIs, you need this API testing apps. Okay, so Postman is one of them, API dog is one of them, Swagger is one of them. Okay, API dog is one of, so you can download this also. The postman is not working. Then we also have Swagger. Okay, I'll show you in the end how to link to your Swagger also. We can link our APIs to Swagger. Okay, so where is it? My workspace. Okay, we go to collections, and now let me create on this plus. Okay, let me create a new HTTP request. Okay, and now this, which are using which method? Post method, right? Am I audible to you all? Yes.
Yes, sir.
And copy that. Okay, this is the base URL, correct? The screen visible to you all. So I'm copying the base URL from here, and then we will just add our endpoint, add teacher, correct? So I copy this. So post, and now which is the endpoint we are trying to hit? The endpoint we are trying to hit, yes. You're able to see my Chrome, Excel, this
Yes, sir.
Eclipse screen. So I copy the endpoint and concatenate it over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so and now it have to give parameters, right? So you see over your query params, which is the first parameter we are passing?
ID
P1.
is TID P1.
P1. So to the
But
key as
so
P1.
what is the key? Okay.
And get the value over here. So my P1 is Alice. Next is P2.
Like mapping is a function like that, na?
Yeah. So
Key and value.
age. Yeah. So age is now 43. And now third is P3. And that is my salary. So I'll say 8,000. So I have to prepare these parameters. See, it is preparing them over here. You see? What we are giving over here, it is preparing the URL over here. Now you have to run the application before doing the send. So your application should run. Okay, so I'll just do a rerun. I'll stop just to make sure that the application is on. Right click, run as Java application. The application should be on when you're trying to hit the API. Okay, application has started. Okay, visible, right? My screen is visible to you all, correct?
Yes, sir.
And now if I hit this and do a send, the response will come here. What is the response?
Record inserted successfully.
And now if you go to your database and just cross check, one record has come over here. Okay,
Okay.
got it?
Yes, sir.
So like this, you can prepare your endpoint. So your front end now, once you're as a backend developer, what you will do is open Postman and try to hit the API and check the response. Once you get the response, your task is done, and you will tell the front end team, if you want to add teacher, please hit this endpoint and pass these 3 parameters. Getting it?
Yes, sir.
So now let's say that I want to delete a teacher, let's say. Okay, now if I want to add one more teacher, then what will I do? Just change the parameters. Just change the parameters, okay? Then 47 and $9,000.
Keys, sir.
Keys will be same.
Keys
no?
also changed.
No.
Okay.
Key will not change. That is a variable. That is,
Okay.
keys are what we have given as params over here. Keys will not change. Okay, and now when you do a send, it says record inserted successfully. If you want to go and check cross-check in the database, just click over here and you will see the second record also has come. ID is automatically incrementing because we are given ID.
Eclipse page, sir.
See over here. Okay.
Okay.
So now if you want to delete a teacher, okay, now whatever record has been inserted, you want to return that record, that record is successfully added. Okay. So whatever record has been added, now what are we returning? Now what are we returning?
Record inserted successfully.
So now that is a string, right?
Yes, sir.
Now I don't want to return that string. I want to return the object. The object will be of what class?
Teacher class.
Teacher class. Okay. So now what I will do is, when I will call the service and I will ask the service to return me a teacher object, return me a, when I will call this service method, I will ask it to return me a teacher object, and what that is returning, I will return it back to the front end. So now what type of value will the teacher service, the add teacher method return me? What type of value will the add teacher method return now? What am I returning over here?
Teachers.
Teacher. So I am returning what the teacher service is returning to me.
Teacher type.
Returning whatever the teacher service add method is returning to me. And
Okay.
this is of type teacher. So now my teacher service should return me a teacher. It should return me a teacher. So I will say now don't return me a void, return me a teacher. So I will say return. So now whichever object we have added, that object will reflect in the response. Now in the response, it will not say record added successfully. It will show me a JSON object. It will show me a JSON object which I have added. So if your save method, if you want to return what object you have saved, you can just say return and type of object over here. Both options are available. If you don't want to return, say void. And if you want to return the object, say return me the teacher object which you have added. So this object will be returned by the repository to the service. And the service will then return this object to the controller. And the controller will return this object to the front end. Okay. Just do a project clean. This should go. And now as we have done changes in the application, we have to restart the application. Okay, application has started. Now if I go to my postman, and now if I try to hit the third object, the same endpoint, okay? Charles 41 and 8,500. Now if I do a send, now the response will be the object which I added. See? So this is where our task as a backend developer finishes. That once we return the object, once we have tested the endpoint and the endpoint is returning the desired output, our task as backend developer stops over here. Now the front end team will take it forward from here. Okay, getting it, guys?
Yes, sir.
So now the object which I was adding, I was passing them as three different parameters, correct? Now if I want to add the object and I want to pass them as one JSON object. So see here, let me come to here. What we were passing three things from the front end, correct? Is my paint screen visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
So how many parameters were we passing individually? Request param 3,
Three, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
What happens is at times the front end just sends me one teacher object, JSON object. The front end will send me a, like how we have over here.
Yes, sir. One object.
What? See, what is this? What is this?
Is sir,
Teacher
this is
JSON
the
object, right?
object of a teacher type. Yes, sir.
So this is a teacher
Name,
JSON.
Charles 41 and cell. Yes, sir.
So at times your front end sends you data in a JSON format like this. So it says TID will not be, we won't need the TID because TID is auto incrementing. Now it
Yes,
says
sir.
that you add this object for me. Now I'm sending you directly an object only. Directly I'm sending you a,
Which the front end developer directly put the value in address bar.
yeah. So directly what we will do is now we will read the object directly. Now we will not read three individual values. We will read this object. So this is a teacher object, correct? So
Yes, sir.
that is called as request body. That is called as what? Request body. That is called as request body. Is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now just because you can't have two functions, so let me change the function name. Add teacher by request body. Okay. And you can use the same methods over here. So whatever is the endpoint, you can use the function name. Now that will take a request body, and that request body object will be of what type? See over here, request body. That object will be of what type?
Teacher.
So now I'm getting the T1 object directly from the front end. So I will not make the object. Directly I will just say this. Whatever object is coming from the front end, just add that object. Getting?
Yes,
So now I will get the object as a request body, and I will pass that object to the teacher service method. Method remains the same. Okay, this is just plug and play. So the same method which I was using to add, I'm using the same method over here also. Just at the different endpoint. So now if I want to access this endpoint, I cannot pass request params. So how will I pass the object now? So I will pass the object as a request body. So now if I want to hit this, so you see body over here, go to body and go to raw and pass the JSON object over here. Pass the JSON object over here in body and raw. And you are trying to say that please add this object for me. From 48 and let's say 13,000. So now the data which is coming now, this is not that add teacher endpoint. The endpoint also has changed. The endpoint is this add teacher by request body. When you will hit that endpoint, you will hit over here, and that will come as a in the body in raw. So you can take it as JSON over here. So when I give raw, I give the data, and then you can from that text option you can choose JSON. My data is in JSON format. Now as we have made changes to the application, we'll have to restart the application. So stop, click on this red square, clear the slate, again restart the application. So if you make a small change in the application, you need to restart the application for it to take effect. We have a dev tool and dev tool dependency. If we add that dev tool dependency, then you don't need to restart all over again. So now as my application started, now I try to hit this endpoint. I'm adding, so I'm not passing the TID because that is auto increment. I'm passing this object. So when I run this, send, it has added that object for me over here. It is returning what it has added. So it has given ID as 4 to DOM, and rest 3 things are the same which I added. Now if you go and check over here in the database, do a refresh, the DOM object has been added. Got it? So how many ways we have of accepting the data from the front end? Yes. How many ways have I shown? You can accept individual parameters or you can accept the entire object as once. So who can do a recap now of this?